Imagine, if you will, a world long before the rise of cities, before kings or scribes recorded the first events in ink or stone. A world where the wind whispered through untouched forests, where rivers carved their paths without the interruption of bridges or dams, and where humanity, or something like it, moved quietly across the earth. The familiar story we tell ourselves, that history begins with civilization, with dates neatly arranged in textbooks, with names of rulers and conquests, is comforting, yes, but perhaps also incomplete. There are shadows that stretch far beyond the light of recorded memory. Shadows where fragments of another story wait to be discovered, fragments that speak not of familiar progress, but of a deep, hidden past. It is in these shadows that our curiosity first stirs. We tend to imagine that the Earth's past is well mapped, that the chronicles of humanity form a tidy line, beginning in one place and spreading outward like sunlight over a hill. But what if that line is far more tangled than we realize? What if the origins of humanity and the echoes of civilizations long forgotten extend into times so distant that they challenge the very foundation of what we believe? As we drift into this narrative, the contrast between what is known and what is hidden becomes a gentle companion, a quiet tension that invites the mind to wander, to imagine, to listen. Archaeology, history, and myth offer us glimpses, though often incomplete. Tools made of stone or bone, the faint impressions of footprints hardened in ancient mud, carvings etched into rocks. These silent witnesses hint at lives and events we may never fully understand. They are the faint notes of a melody that has long ceased to play, yet their resonance lingers. The human imagination, in its calmest moments, can wander into these spaces, tracing connections between disparate fragments, and in doing so, it touches a story older than any document or manuscript. Consider for a moment the vast stretches of wilderness that existed before humans cultivated land or tamed animals. Imagine the slow passage of time, where generations rose and fell, where fires were kindled for warmth and protection, yet the knowledge of those people left little behind to be cataloged by later historians. The quiet persistence of life, the subtle ingenuity, the rituals and beliefs, all of it may have existed outside the gaze of what we now call recorded history. And yet, the earth remembers. It remembers in stone, in sediment, in the slow accumulation of traces that hint at what once was. Even the myths and stories passed down through generations carry fragments of this hidden past. Tales of floods, great migrations, and mysterious peoples often feel timeless, echoing across continents in shapes both familiar and strange. These stories, once dismissed as mere legend, may instead serve as faint beacons, guiding us toward truths obscured by the erosion of time. They are whispers from a world we cannot fully access. And yet, by listening closely, we begin to sense a rhythm, a pattern, a hidden continuity that ties the distant past to the present. As we open ourselves to this exploration, it is not the purpose to disrupt the comfort of known history, but rather to gently expand its borders. The contrast between what is accepted and what remains unseen, between the documented and the speculative, provides a quiet tension that fuels curiosity without urgency. It is a tension meant to be savored, a companionable murmur that accompanies the mind as it drifts across landscapes of imagination and fact, lightly touching on the possibility that the story of humanity is far older, far richer, and far stranger than we have been taught. Tonight, we begin a journey along this hidden path. It is a journey that moves slowly, deliberately, like the turning of seasons or the ebb of tides. It asks us to pause, to listen, and to let our minds float gently into the quiet spaces between recorded history and the echoes of the unknown. In these spaces, we find the first glimmers of story that stretches back into the forgotten dawn, a story written not just in stone or bone, but in the very pulse of the earth itself. And so, we begin, stepping softly into a past far older than we have been told, a past that waits patiently for those willing to wander through its silent corridors. listening to whispers from the forgotten dawn. Long before cities rose and empires etched their names into stone, there were footprints, literal, fleeting impressions pressed into mud and sediment that would endure for tens of thousands of years. Some were human, some were of creatures we barely recognize, yet each tells a quiet story of life moving across an earth unrecorded by ink or paper. These traces are tantalizing because they speak to a time we can scarcely imagine, a world that existed long before the history we know began to unfold. There's a subtle beauty in this, the evidence of human, or human-like, presence etched so delicately that only the most patient observers can detect it. And it is here, in these delicate imprints, that we begin to feel the tension between what is known and what remains hidden, the contrast between our recorded memory and the whisper of forgotten epics. Archaeologists have discovered artifacts that do not fit neatly into the accepted timeline. Tools carved from stone, sometimes far more sophisticated than expected for their age, hint at ingenuity that predates the civilizations we are familiar with. Fossilized footprints, preserved in hardened volcanic ash or sediment, occasionally suggest humans walked the earth far earlier than textbooks admit. These traces are fragments, silent witnesses to lives that once moved, spoke, and thought in ways we can only speculate upon. They are reminders that history, as it is commonly told, may be only a narrow corridor through a vast, hidden mansion of human experience. Some of these discoveries challenge everything we think we know. Consider a set of footprints found in an ancient riverbed, their depth and spacing suggesting a being both familiar and strange, moving in a manner that does not correspond neatly with our understanding of early humans. Or the enigmatic stone tools that appear in layers of sediment older than previously accepted human habitation. Scientists often debate these anomalies, sometimes dismissing them, sometimes marveling in awe. Yet for the quiet observer, these fragments are not merely puzzles. They are whispers, echoes of a past that resists tidy categorization, and they invite us to imagine a world more complex than our historical models allow. What makes this hidden past so compelling is the contrast it presents. On one side, there is the comfort of accepted timelines, neatly arranged, neat lines of progress, dates, and sequences that feel stable and safe. On the other side, there is the mystery of the unknown, irregular, unsettling, and beautiful in its ambiguity. The human mind, in its slowest, most contemplative state, is drawn to such contrasts. It wants to reconcile them, to seek patterns, yet it is also content to linger in uncertainty, to let the imagination explore the gaps between what is known and what is only hinted at. For those who listen with patience, this tension creates a gentle, meditative curiosity that can carry one deep in a thought without ever demanding answers. We can look at stone tools found in layers far older than expected and imagine the hands that made them. Hands that chipped, shaped, and polished, crafting implements not just for survival, but perhaps for art, ritual, or communication. These hands belong to beings who walked across landscapes utterly unfamiliar to us, yet whose lives left indelible marks that persist to this day. We do not know their names, their voices, or their stories, but in these artifacts, their existence is quietly, stubbornly affirmed. The act of imagining their presence bridges the vast gulf of time, creating a sense of continuity between our modern consciousness and the distant, almost ungraspable past. The fossilized footprints, too, offer a strange intimacy. They are impressions of movement, moments captured in time and hardened by earth and ash. Some suggest solitary travelers, others groups moving together, perhaps hunting, perhaps merely wandering. The imagination can linger here, tracing each step, sensing the careful rhythm of life in a world untouched by the constructs of civilization. There's a meditation in this, a slow, deliberate reflection that invites the mind to wander alongside these early travelers, to feel the texture of the earth beneath imagined feet, and to sense the weight of their silent presence. What does it mean, then, if these traces belong to a human presence far older than conventional history allows? It suggests that the story of humanity is deeper, more complex, and far more mysterious than we have been taught. It challenges the notion that history is linear or complete, reminding us instead that it is layered, fragmented, and often invisible. This is not an unsettling thought. Rather, it is quietly awe-inspiring. It positions us not as masters of time, but as observers peering through a keyhole into a vast, hidden mansion of human existence, aware of its corridors and rooms, yet never fully able to enter. As we drift through these reflections, it becomes clear that curiosity does not require answers. The mere suggestion that humans may have walked the earth tens or even hundreds of thousands of years earlier than previously believed is enough to expand the mind gently. It allows the imagination to roam across ancient landscapes, to trace the patterns of life that predate cities, governments, or recorded events. In these quiet moments, history is not a series of dates or battles, but a living, breathing tapestry of presence and possibility, woven from the faintest hints and echoes left behind. This meditation on the deep past reminds us that the world is older, stranger, and more wondrous than our textbooks can contain. Every stone tool, every footprint, every fragment of bone holds a story that refuses to be fully told. And yet, in their silence, they speak volumes, inviting us to listen, to imagine, and to marvel at the hidden dimensions of human existence. They whisper of a humanity that is patient, persistent, and profoundly enigmatic. A humanity whose story stretches far beyond the familiar contours of recorded memory, waiting for those willing to wander through the shadows of time with quiet wonder and gentle curiosity. Long before written records, long before the rise of kings and kingdoms, there were structures, silent, monumental, and enduring, that seemed to defy explanation. Across continents, in deserts, jungles, and open plains, massive stones rise in formations so precise, so deliberate, that they challenge the notion of what early humans could achieve. Some are arranged in perfect circles, others in alignments pointing to celestial events, and still others form walls and terraces whose sheer scale inspires awe. These constructions are the work of hands long vanished, the result of minds we cannot fully comprehend, yet their presence whispers a story that reaches across time, inviting us to imagine a world far older and more complex than the one described in conventional history. The tension between light and shadow is ever present here. On one hand, we have the accepted history, the neat timelines of human civilization that place monumental architecture in specific eras. On the other, there are structures that seem to emerge from the mists of prehistory, challenging those timelines, hinting at knowledge and skill that should not exist in such ancient contexts. Stone circles, pyramids, and megaliths become not just objects of curiosity, but symbols of the mystery that underlies humanity's past. They invite us to ponder who built them, why they were built, and what knowledge, now lost, guided their creation. Consider the precision of some of these sites. Stones weighing many tons, carved and placed with such exactness that modern engineers marvel at their alignment. Yet these feats were achieved without the benefit of cranes, computers, or modern machinery. How did these early builders measure so carefully, move such immense stones, and create structures that have endured for millennia? Was there a shared knowledge that spanned continents? Or were these isolated sparks of ingenuity that arose independently, each one a quiet testament to human persistence and creativity? The questions linger like a gentle murmur, not demanding answers, but encouraging contemplation. It is in the quiet moments, as we imagine these constructions standing in empty landscapes, that the scale of their mystery becomes apparent. Imagine a circle of stones rising under the light of the setting sun, shadows stretching across the ground in a pattern that aligns with the solstice. The builders are long gone, yet their intentions remain encoded in the very geometry of the stones. What messages did they hope to leave behind? Were these structures functional, ceremonial, symbolic, or perhaps all three? The lack of clear answers transforms each site into a meditative space, where the mind can wander freely, tracing connections between past and present, known and unknown. Megalithic structures often appear in clusters, as if ancient architects were deliberately mapping the land, leaving markers for purposes we may never fully understand. Terraces, walls, and foundations rise in patterns that suggest planning, coordination, and perhaps even a deeper understanding of astronomy and the cycles of the Earth. The careful observer can sense a rhythm in these creations, a silent harmony between human intention and the natural world. It is this harmony that lends the structures an almost hypnotic quality, encouraging the imagination to drift gently across time, following the slow, deliberate footsteps of those who built them. Some sites are entwined with mystery not only because of their construction, but also because of their placement. Temples and circles are often found in remote locations, atop hills, along rivers, or aligned with distant mountain peaks. Why were these locations chosen? Were they sacred, practical, or perhaps symbolic? Every choice, every alignment, hints at a knowledge system that remains largely hidden from us. The shadows cast by these mysteries invite us to consider the limits of our understanding, reminding us that the past is not fully illuminated, that much remains hidden, waiting patiently for those who are willing to observe with quiet attention. The human connection to these structures is subtle, yet profound. By walking among ancient stones, tracing the lines of walls, and observing alignments with the stars, we can feel a bridge to those long gone. We sense a continuity, a shared purpose, a quiet dialogue between past and present. Even without knowing the exact intentions behind these constructions, we can experience their beauty, their precision, and their endurance. And in doing so, we touch the pulse of a humanity far older than our recorded history admits. And yet, these structures often defy explanation entirely. Some constructions suggest advanced mathematical understanding, knowledge of astronomy, and engineering prowess that should not have existed at the time, or so we are told. When we examine these feats, we confront the tension between what is known and what is possible. Perhaps our conventional narratives underestimate the capabilities of early humans, or perhaps there are stories lost to time that we may never recover. This tension is not meant to unsettle, but to intrigue, offering a quiet space for contemplation where wonder outweighs certainty. As we wander through these landscapes in our imagination, a pattern begins to emerge. Not a definitive answer, but a rhythm, a sense of human persistence and ingenuity stretching back into deep time. These ancient structures are not merely remnants of stone. They're echoes of intent, fragments of thought and belief that have survived millennia. They're the silent testimony of people who, despite the limits of their era, aspired to create something lasting, something that would endure beyond their lifetimes. In this, there's both mystery and poetry, a quiet majesty that invites reflection and meditation. Finally, as we leave the megaliths behind in our mind's eye, we carry with us a sense of both awe and humility. These constructions, while silent, speak volumes. They challenge the neat timelines we have been given, they illuminate the possibilities of human creativity, and they invite us to listen, to imagine, to wonder, to drift gently through the corridors of history where fact and mystery intermingle. The journey through these stone witnesses sets the stage for the next chapter, where the hidden knowledge of the earth itself will be revealed, and where we will continue to explore a past far older, far stranger, and far more wondrous than we have ever been told. Long before modern science codified the movements of stars, the cycles of the moon, and the rhythm of the seasons, there were people who observed the natural world with remarkable precision. They tracked celestial bodies not with telescopes, but with careful observation, aligning their lives with patterns that unfolded silently in the sky. Some of these ancient civilizations left traces in stone, in earthworks, in monuments whose alignments point with uncanny accuracy to solstices, equinoxes, and other astronomical phenomena. These sites suggest a knowledge that surpasses mere survival, They hint at an understanding of the cosmos and the Earth's rhythms that is quietly astonishing. In this space between what is known and what is possible, we glimpse a humanity that was both deeply observant and profoundly connected to the world around them. Consider the alignments of megalithic circles, pyramids, and temples found across continents. Some structures are oriented to the rising and setting of the sun at key times of the year, while others mark the paths of planets or distant stars. The precision of these alignments raises questions about the observational skills, mathematical knowledge, and cultural priorities of those who built them. They hint at societies that valued not only the practical necessities of life, but also the cycles of the heavens and the patterns of the earth. The contrast between our modern assumptions of primitive early humans and the sophistication evident in these constructions invites a sense of wonder and a quiet reevaluation of what knowledge truly means. Even more intriguing are the tools and techniques used to achieve such precision. Ancient builders had no modern instruments, yet some stone constructions align with astronomical events with a degree of accuracy that can still surprise engineers today. Were these alignments accidental, or were they the result of careful, long-term observation and calculation? The evidence suggests intention, the deliberate application of knowledge that has been largely forgotten. This creates a subtle tension between what we can verify and what remains speculative, a space where the mind can gently wander, contemplating the ingenuity and wisdom of people long vanished. Beyond monuments, ancient societies also left evidence of their understanding of the natural world in subtler ways. Observations of tides, seasonal migration of animals, patterns of plant growth, and the flow of rivers were woven into daily life. Knowledge was not only practical, but also symbolic, often encoded in rituals, myths, and oral traditions. These practices reveal a worldview in which humans were intimately connected to the cycles of the earth, attentive to its subtle rhythms, and capable of understanding forces that we might now take for granted. In reflecting on this, one can almost hear the quiet heartbeat of the earth, resonating through the lives of those who listened carefully and lived in harmony with it. The more we explore these traces, the more the contrast between modern assumptions and ancient reality becomes apparent. Today, we often equate technological sophistication with intelligence, assuming that early humans were primitive because they lacked writing, machines, or urban centers. Yet the evidence suggests otherwise. A society capable of measuring time, predicting celestial events, and designing structures in harmony with these patterns demonstrates a level of intellect and understanding that is both subtle and profound. The mystery lies in the fact that so much of this knowledge has been lost, erased by the passage of time, or overlooked because it does not fit neatly into conventional historical frameworks. Some of the most fascinating clues come from places where astronomy and architecture intersect. In several ancient sites, for example, corridors, doorways, or stones were aligned to capture the light of the sun or moon at specific moments. During the solstices, sunlight might illuminate a particular chamber, tracing a path along a carved wall, marking the passage of time in a quiet, almost ritualistic way. These observations were not merely decorative. They were functional, symbolic, and deeply meaningful. They suggest a people attuned to the cosmos, capable of translating careful observation into enduring structures that speak across millennia. We also find hints of mathematical understanding embedded in these constructions. Ratios, angles, and symmetry suggest not only aesthetic sensibility, but also an underlying comprehension of geometry. While much of this knowledge may have been practical, used to ensure stability, alignment, or efficiency, it also hints at abstract thinking, an ability to conceptualize patterns that transcend the immediate needs of survival. The quiet sophistication of such design invites reflection. How did these early humans acquire such knowledge, and why was it so often forgotten? Here, the tension between known history and lost wisdom is most palpable, gently urging the imagination to explore possibilities beyond conventional narratives. Moreover, this knowledge was not static. It evolved over generations, transmitted orally, through apprenticeship, and through careful observation. Unlike written records, which are fixed and formal, this wisdom was dynamic, growing with experience and observation. Each generation contributed to the refinement of techniques and understanding, sometimes leaving behind subtle markers that archaeologists and historians now interpret with awe. The continuity of this knowledge, even when fragmented, reveals a quiet but persistent thread linking past and present, suggesting that humans have long been capable of remarkable insight, far earlier than we often acknowledge. And yet, for all we can infer, much remains a mystery. We do not know the full extent of their observations, the frameworks they used to understand the world, or the cultural significance of the knowledge they accumulated. What we do know is that evidence exists in the alignment of stones, the design of structures, and the patterns observed in the natural world. These traces invite contemplation, not immediate answers, encouraging a slow, reflective engagement that is both calming and intellectually stimulating. The juxtaposition of what is known and what remains hidden sustains a gentle curiosity, a quiet sense of awe that lingers long after the mind has moved on. As we drift through this reflection, it becomes clear that knowledge is not confined to written history or modern technology. The ancients observed, measured, and recorded the rhythms of life and the cosmos in ways that speak to a profound understanding of their world. By contemplating these patterns and constructions, we connect with a lineage of insight that stretches back far deeper than our textbooks suggest. This connection is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it is powerful. It reminds us that the story of humanity is not only a story of survival and conquest, but also of observation, understanding, and the quiet pursuit of wisdom. In this gentle exploration of ancient knowledge, the mind is invited to wander through a landscape of discovery, tracing lines of thought and observation that stretch across centuries. There is no rush, no demand for conclusion, only the slow, reflective journey of imagining, contemplating, and absorbing the quiet genius of our ancestors. And as we leave this section behind, we carry with us the sense that humanity's past is not simply a sequence of events, but a tapestry of understanding, skill, and connection, intricately woven into the very fabric of the earth, waiting patiently for those willing to listen and observe. Long before the invention of writing, before the construction of stone monuments, humans told stories. These stories were not merely entertainment. They were vessels for memory, carriers of wisdom, and maps of experience. Myths, legends, and oral traditions often contain echoes of events and knowledge that predate written history. Across continents and cultures, we find stories that share striking similarities, even among people who could not have directly communicated. These patterns suggest that myths may preserve, in symbolic form, fragments of the distant past, including memories of migrations, natural disasters, and ancient societies long vanished. Listening to these tales, we begin to sense a world where fact and story intermingle, where memory and imagination coalesce into a quiet, enduring record of human experience. Consider the flood myths that recur across cultures. In Mesopotamia, there is the story of Utnapishtim, who survived a great deluge. In India, the tale of Manu describes a similar event. In ancient Greece, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive a catastrophic flood that reshapes the world. These stories, separated by thousands of miles and countless generations, may hint at collective memories of environmental upheavals, passed down in oral traditions long before they were committed to clay tablets or parchment. The details differ, the characters change, yet the central motif persists, like a whisper echoing through time. It is a reminder that stories are more than entertainment. They are threads connecting the present with a past we may not fully understand. Myths often encode knowledge about the natural world. In many cultures, creation stories reference celestial bodies, seasonal changes, or the behavior of animals and rivers. These narratives may serve as mnemonic devices, preserving practical information in a poetic and symbolic form. For example, Certain myths describe the movement of the sun and moon, the ebb and flow of tides, or the cycles of agricultural life. While these details may appear wrapped in metaphor, they reveal a deep observational understanding of the world, woven into cultural memory. The act of listening to these stories, even centuries later, allows us to catch glimpses of how our ancestors interpreted the patterns of nature and their place within it. Legends of ancient civilizations also abound, describing peoples who possessed remarkable knowledge, built monumental structures, or lived in harmony with the natural world. Some speak of cities that sank beneath the sea, of great builders whose wisdom was lost to time. At first glance, such tales may appear fanciful, the product of imagination. Yet, when paired with archaeological anomalies, unexpected structures, advanced knowledge embedded in construction, or artifacts that do not fit accepted timelines, these myths take on a different quality. They hint at a memory, carried across generations, of achievements long forgotten. The contrast between myth and tangible evidence creates a tension that is both unsettling and mesmerizing, inviting the mind to wander gently through possibilities. Oral traditions are often deeply symbolic, encoding complex ideas about human behavior, morality, and the cycles of life and death. Heroes, monsters, gods, and spirits may represent natural forces, societal challenges, or psychological truths. As we trace the recurring motifs in myths across cultures, we begin to see patterns not of literal events, but of universal human experience. These symbolic echoes may also preserve hints of historical reality, hidden beneath layers of allegory and narrative flourish. In this sense, myths are both familiar and mysterious, comforting in their narrative rhythms, yet endlessly intriguing in their potential connections to the hidden past. It is worth considering the subtlety of these stories. Unlike written records, which provide explicit information, myths require interpretation, reflection, and imagination. They demand that the listener engage actively, that the mind fill in the gaps between words and symbols. In doing so, the storyteller and the listener create a shared mental space where history, memory, and imagination intersect. Here, in this quiet space between telling and listening, we may find traces of a human past that is far older and stranger than we have been taught. Myths become more than entertainment. They are meditative windows into the rhythms, concerns, and wisdom of people who lived long before our time. Some myths describe journeys of humans, gods, or spirits across vast landscapes. These journeys may encode knowledge of migration patterns, environmental changes, or interactions between early peoples. Legends of great treks, of people moving across continents to escape catastrophe or to seek new lands, can mirror what archaeologists now piece together from genetic studies and fossil evidence. The stories may not be precise records of events, yet their persistence over millennia suggests that they preserve kernels of truth, whispered from generation to generation in symbolic form. In this way, myth and archaeology converge, illuminating paths that conventional history may overlook. The aesthetic and rhythmic qualities of myths also serve to preserve memory. Repetition, rhyme, and pattern make stories easier to recall and transmit accurately across generations. Songs, chants, and poetic structures act as vessels for knowledge, allowing it to survive even in the absence of writing. Through this lens, myths are not static relics. They're living threads of cultural memory, stretching back into the hidden past. By listening closely, we begin to recognize echoes of human experience that conventional timelines cannot fully capture, and we sense the persistence of memory, even when physical evidence is scarce. Myths also reveal the interplay between wonder and caution, between light and shadow, between the known and the unknowable. They speak of creation and destruction, of heroes and monsters, of worlds familiar yet strangely different from our own. This interplay mirrors the tension in the study of ancient history. The contrast between the comforting narrative of recorded events and the enigmatic evidence of civilizations, knowledge, and migrations that lie beyond our current understanding. By engaging with myths, we are invited to inhabit this space of gentle tension, where curiosity is encouraged and the imagination is free to explore possibilities without urgency. Finally, the study of myths reminds us that history is not only written in stone or recorded in documents. It is carried in the stories we tell, the patterns we remember, and the symbols we pass on. In these tales, we can sense a thread connecting generations over tens of thousands of years, linking us to ancestors whose names we may never know, but whose presence is quietly inscribed in narrative memory. They hint at a humanity that has always sought to understand its place in the world, to preserve knowledge, and to convey meaning across the silent expanse of time. And as we listen, we are drawn into this hidden story, feeling the gentle rhythm of a past that stretches far beyond the familiar, a past that patiently waits for those willing to hear its whispers. Long before we began to measure time with calendars, clocks, or written records, the earth moved to rhythms far grander than human comprehension. Mountains rose and fell, rivers carved their paths, and seas advanced and receded in cycles that stretched over millennia. For those who walked the earth in its early ages, these forces were both familiar and formidable, shaping lives, guiding migrations, and occasionally leaving behind scars so profound that entire communities were swept from memory. The story of humanity is inseparable from these natural events, and yet much of it has been lost, buried beneath layers of sediment, ash, and water. In contemplating these cataclysms, we confront the fragile yet persistent nature of human existence, and we sense how much of the past has quietly slipped beyond our grasp. Some of the most dramatic examples of these cataclysms are found in the evidence of floods, volcanic eruptions, and glacial movements. Flood myths, which appear in cultures around the world, may reflect collective memory of rising seas and devastating surges that reshaped coastlines and erased settlements. Volcanic eruptions left layers of ash that preserved certain moments while obliterating others, as though the earth itself was recording its own history selectively. Ice ages covered vast swaths of land and glaciers, forcing migrations, altering habitats, and perhaps even wiping out entire populations. The contrast between human persistence and the power of nature creates a quiet tension. Life endured, yet much of it was erased, leaving only fragments for us to discover. Consider the stories hidden in sedimentary layers. Archaeologists uncover sudden deposits of sand, ash, or debris that suggest rapid environmental upheaval, often coinciding with unusual gaps in the human record. These gaps challenge conventional timelines, hinting at civilizations that may have flourished briefly, only to vanish under circumstances we are only beginning to understand. Tools, structures, and evidence of sophisticated activity may appear abruptly, then disappear, leaving the curious observer to wonder, what happened here, and why did it leave so little trace? The earth, in its quiet power, preserves some things while erasing others, creating a record that is partial, enigmatic, and endlessly intriguing. Floods, in particular, offer a compelling example of both destruction and preservation. As waters rise and recede, they can erase entire settlements, yet sometimes they deposit layers of silt and clay that preserve traces of human activity. Stone tools, pottery fragments, and even impressions of dwellings can survive beneath these layers, waiting to be uncovered by patient observers. The narrative of loss and survival echoes in both mythology and archaeology, suggesting that humanity has long contended with forces beyond its control, adapting, moving, and sometimes disappearing entirely. In this quiet tension between presence and absence, we glimpse the impermanence of human endeavor and the resilience that allows life to endure against overwhelming odds. Volcanic activity adds another dimension to this hidden story. Eruptions can reshape landscapes almost instantaneously, covering fertile valleys with ash, redirecting rivers, and creating conditions that force migrations. Yet these same eruptions can preserve fleeting moments in extraordinary detail. Frozen victims, imprinted artifacts, and layers of volcanic debris that serve as both tomb and time capsule. The juxtaposition of destruction and preservation mirrors the broader patterns of human history. Some traces survive to tell their story, while others vanish, leaving only mystery in their wake. In contemplating these events, we are reminded of the delicate balance between human ingenuity and the immense forces of nature, a balance that has always shaped the trajectory of civilizations. Ice ages, with their slow, relentless advance, also left indelible marks on the Earth and on human history. Glaciers carved valleys, created lakes, and altered the distribution of flora and fauna. Entire landscapes became inhospitable, forcing early humans to migrate, adapt, or perish. Archaeological gaps may reflect these movements, leaving behind only fragmented evidence of civilizations once thriving in regions now buried beneath ice or long-abandoned tundra. The stark contrast between the permanence of geological processes and the fragility of human life imbues these ancient cataclysms with a sense of awe and quiet meditation. Even smaller, subtler environmental shifts could have profound effects. Rising seas slowly submerged coastal settlements. Shifting river courses disrupted established trade routes, and prolonged droughts altered the availability of resources. Such changes may not have been catastrophic in the dramatic sense, yet they shaped the course of human development, influencing where populations could thrive, how societies evolved, and what knowledge was retained or lost. The past is a delicate tapestry, woven from countless interactions between humanity and the environment, and it is in these subtle patterns that much of the hidden story resides. When we contemplate these cataclysms, it is impossible not to notice the resilience of human beings. Despite floods, eruptions, and ice, humanity persisted, migrated, and rebuilt, sometimes in entirely new regions. Yet the traces of those who did not survive remain faint, scattered, and often enigmatic. The quiet disappearance of entire settlements or cultural practices leaves gaps in the historical record, reminding us that what we know is only a fraction of what once existed. These gaps, like shadows in a sunlit room, invite reflection and imagination, encouraging the mind to wander gently through the possibilities of lost worlds. This reflection on natural cataclysms also reveals a pattern. History is not only shaped by human action, but also by forces far larger than any single civilization. The Earth itself is an active participant in our story, preserving some moments and erasing others, creating a rhythm of loss and survival that resonates across millennia. It is a rhythm that teaches humility, patience, and wonder, reminding us that the story of humanity is not a simple, linear path, but a complex, layered interplay between life and the ever-changing planet we inhabit. And so, as we drift through this meditation, the mind is invited to consider not only the cataclysms themselves, but their silent consequences. Each layer of ash, each shifted coastline, each glacial valley is a message from the past, waiting to be interpreted. We can imagine ancient peoples moving across the land, responding to the quiet and not-so-quiet upheavals around them, adapting, surviving, and sometimes leaving behind only fragments for us to discover. In this, there is both melancholy and beauty, the impermanence of life juxtaposed with the enduring traces of existence, the known mingling with the unknown, the light of survival framed by the shadow of loss. As we conclude this section, we carry with us an awareness of the profound impact of natural forces on human history. These cataclysms did more than destroy. They shaped migrations, inspired myths, influenced settlement patterns, and perhaps even erased civilizations from collective memory. In reflecting on their power and subtlety, we come to understand that the story of humanity is entwined with the story of the Earth itself, a story that stretches far beyond recorded history, waiting for those willing to listen with patience and imagination. The path ahead will take us deeper into these echoes, exploring the traces of human presence etched in stone, bone, and memory, as we continue our journey through a past far older and stranger than we have been told. Amid the quiet landscapes of our world, buried beneath layers of soil, rock, and time, lie traces of lives that challenge our understanding of human history. Skeletal remains, tools, and artifacts appear in contexts that do not fit neatly into accepted timelines, hinting at a past that is far older and far stranger than conventional archaeology acknowledges. These remnants, silent and enduring, invite us to pause and listen, to feel the subtle echo of humanity stretching back tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands of years. In their quiet persistence, they speak to us across time, offering fragments of stories that have otherwise been lost, like whispers in the dark corridors of prehistory. Some skeletal finds are particularly intriguing. Bones unearthed in deep sedimentary layers, sometimes alongside artifacts of surprising sophistication, suggest human or human-like presence far earlier than we have been taught. The careful examination of these remains reveals details about diet, health, movement, and even social structure, hinting at communities that were thriving in ways we might not have imagined. The contrast between these tangible remains and the neat timelines presented in textbooks creates a gentle, lingering tension. We are reminded that the story of humanity is not linear or simple. It is complex, layered, and often enigmatic, waiting patiently for those who are willing to look closer and imagine beyond the known. Equally compelling are the tools and artifacts associated with these ancient remains. Objects carved from stone, bone, or other materials often display a level of craftsmanship that seems extraordinary for the age in which they are found. Some tools suggest specialized functions, requiring both skill and knowledge to create, while others bear marks that hint at symbolic or ritual use. These objects serve as quiet testimony to the intelligence and ingenuity of early humans, bridging the gap between what we understand and what remains hidden. As we contemplate them, the mind is invited to wander slowly, tracing the hands that made these tools and the lives of those who used them. Footprints, preserved in ancient mud or volcanic ash, provide another kind of connection. Unlike bones or tools, they capture a single, ephemeral moment, the exact step of an individual frozen in time. These impressions reveal not only the presence of humans or human-like beings, but also their size, gait, and movement patterns. Sometimes, the footprints suggest creatures taller or larger than what we might expect, hinting at populations or species that existed alongside early humans. In examining these delicate impressions, we feel the intimacy of a vanished world, sensing movement and presence in a way that few other artifacts can convey. One of the most intriguing aspects of these anomalies is the challenge they pose to established narratives. Fossils and tools that appear older than conventional timelines, or in locations previously thought uninhabitable, invite us to reconsider assumptions about human evolution, migration, and technological development. Did humans or human-like species travel farther, adapt more quickly, or develop sophisticated skills earlier than textbooks suggest? While definitive answers may elude us, the very presence of these anomalies creates a fertile ground for contemplation, a quiet tension between the certainty of accepted history and the mysteries that linger just beyond its reach. The condition and context of these finds often add to the intrigue. Bones may appear unusually robust, suggesting a lifestyle of great physical demands, or they may show evidence of medical care, ritual, or symbolic practice. Tools may be intricately shaped, demonstrating patterns of thought and planning that hint at abstract reasoning. These details create a tapestry of human activity that is simultaneously familiar and alien, a reminder that the story of our species is far more intricate than the simplified narratives we often inherit. Each fragment is a bridge to a distant world, inviting the mind to drift gently through its possibilities. In some cases, skeletal remains and artifacts appear in clusters, suggesting organized communities, social structures, or even early forms of culture. Graves, ritual deposits, or intentionally arranged stones hint at behavior imbued with meaning, a consciousness that sought to engage with the world beyond mere survival. The interplay of light and shadow here is subtle but profound. On one side, we have the practical, biological reality of human life. On the other, we glimpse the spiritual, symbolic, and intellectual dimensions that persist even when the historical record is silent. This duality, between the tangible and the mysterious, forms the heart of the fascination that draws us deeper into the past. Occasionally, these discoveries are accompanied by anomalies that defy easy explanation. Objects appear in geological layers far older than their supposed origin, or skeletal remains display traits that do not fit neatly into known categories of early humans. Some artifacts suggest advanced knowledge or skills that seem impossible for their time. When these elements converge, they create a quiet, almost hypnotic curiosity, encouraging us to imagine worlds that history has largely forgotten. The mind is invited to explore without urgency, to linger in the wonder of possibility, and to embrace the mysteries that emerge from the silence of prehistory. What is particularly striking about these finds is their persistence across continents. From Europe to Asia, Africa to the Americas, skeletal remains and artifacts hint at ancient populations moving, adapting, and thriving in environments that challenge conventional understanding. These patterns suggest a connectedness, a shared thread of human experience that predates written records and recorded history. By tracing these threads, we begin to sense a continuity that links diverse populations, cultures, and landscapes, illuminating a human story far broader and older than the familiar narrative suggests. In reflecting on these echoes of the past, it becomes clear that much of what we know about humanity is partial and provisional. Archaeology, for all its rigor, can only reveal what survives in the soil, stone, and sediment. The rest remains invisible, lost to time, or perhaps never preserved in a form we can recognize. This realization is not disheartening. Rather, it is deeply humbling and strangely comforting. It reminds us that history is not a closed book, but a living dialogue between discovery, interpretation, and imagination. Each bone, each tool, each footprint is a conversation across millennia, a quiet invitation to listen, wonder, and reflect. And so, as we wander through these silent witnesses, we begin to understand that humanity's story is not confined to the linear timelines of textbooks. It stretches farther, deeper, and more mysteriously than we have been taught. These anomalies, skeletal remains, tools, footprints, serve as gentle guides, leading us through corridors of time where the known meets the unknown, where the light of discovery illuminates the shadows of mystery. In this space, curiosity is cultivated slowly and meditatively, allowing the imagination to drift freely, embracing the profound complexity of our shared human past. Across the globe, in deserts, mountains, jungles, and plains, there exist sites that quietly defy conventional explanation. Stone formations, ancient cities, and enigmatic artifacts appear in places that challenge our understanding of early human capability and distribution. From South America to Africa, from the Middle East to the Pacific, these sites share characteristics that suggest an intelligence and sophistication previously thought impossible for their supposed age. Some are aligned with the stars, others with rivers or mountain ranges, and a few contain artifacts that hint at technological or mathematical knowledge far beyond what we expect from early civilizations. As we explore these places in our minds, we begin to sense a subtle pattern, a hidden story that stretches across continents and centuries, inviting reflection and quiet curiosity. Consider, for instance, the mysterious stone terraces of South America. Carved into steep mountainsides, they not only stabilized the earth, but also created microclimates for growing crops, demonstrating a profound understanding of agriculture and engineering. Nearby, Ancient roads and pathways connect settlements in ways that suggest both planning and long-distance coordination. Yet much of this knowledge, as advanced as it appears, predates written records, leaving historians and archaeologists puzzled. How did these early builders acquire such expertise, and why did it seem to vanish in later centuries? The tension between ingenuity and disappearance creates a quiet, meditative wonder, compelling us to imagine the lives and minds of those who walked these landscapes long before our time. Across the oceans, in the deserts of Africa and the Middle East, we find similarly enigmatic constructions. Massive stone circles, pyramids, and megaliths align with celestial events, demonstrating knowledge of astronomy that seems strikingly precise. Some of these structures appear isolated, while others are part of networks that hint at communication or shared cultural knowledge across great distances. The precision and planning evident in their construction invite questions. Were these societies connected, exchanging ideas across vast landscapes? Or did similar patterns of observation and ingenuity emerge independently in separate cultures? The mind, in its quietest moments, can drift into these possibilities, appreciating the vastness and subtlety of human creativity across time and space. Artifacts recovered from these sites add further intrigue. Tools, ornaments, and ceremonial objects suggest a richness of culture and symbolic thought that often surprises modern observers. Some items are made from materials that must have been transported from faraway regions, implying trade networks or migrations we do not yet fully understand. Others show signs of advanced craftsmanship or abstract thinking, hinting at social or ritualistic structures that exceed what we might expect from populations considered primitive by conventional standards. Each artifact is a thread in the tapestry of human history, a reminder that intelligence, curiosity, and creativity are not modern inventions, but enduring traits of our species. What binds these distant sites together is more than mere coincidence. Across continents, we see parallels in construction techniques, in celestial alignments, and in symbolic representations. Stone circles in Africa bear uncanny resemblance to those in Europe. Agricultural terraces in South America mirror practices found elsewhere. Myths and legends recount similar events, such as floods, migrations, or great builders. These echoes suggest that either knowledge traveled across vast distances or that human ingenuity, facing similar challenges, produced comparable solutions independently. Either way, the patterns challenge our assumptions about the isolation and simplicity of early human cultures. As we imagine walking through these sites, we begin to sense their quiet rhythm. The stones, terraces, and artifacts speak without words, their presence a form of communication across time. They suggest observation, calculation, planning, and care, as if the builders understood both their environment and their place within it. The alignment of stones to the sun or stars, the placement of structures along river valleys or ridge lines, and the careful shaping of tools all convey an intimate knowledge of the world. In this way, the earth itself becomes a repository of knowledge, waiting for the patient observer to perceive its subtle patterns. Some of the most compelling examples are those where evidence seems to defy chronology. Artifacts appear in sedimentary layers older than conventional timelines allow. Structures are found in regions thought uninhabited at the time, and some sites suggest knowledge or technology that should not have existed. These anomalies are not merely curiosities. They're invitations to expand our understanding of what early humans might have known and achieved. They challenge the neat, linear narratives of history and create a gentle tension, a space where imagination and curiosity are allowed to explore possibilities beyond the boundaries of traditional scholarship. The sense of connection across continents is amplified by recurring motifs in art and symbolism. Geometric patterns, depictions of celestial bodies, and representations of animals or mythical beings appear in cultures separated by thousands of miles and centuries. While these similarities may be coincidental, they also suggest that early humans shared common concerns, perceptions, and perhaps even knowledge of the natural world. The act of observing these echoes encourages a contemplative state, allowing us to drift slowly between continents and cultures, feeling the quiet continuity of human thought and creativity across time. In reflecting on these interconnected mysteries, it is impossible not to feel humility. The achievements of ancient people, whether in architecture, astronomy, agriculture, or art, remind us that intelligence and ingenuity are timeless qualities. They also remind us of how much remains hidden, lost beneath the layers of time, waiting for discovery. Every stone, terrace, and artifact is both a revelation and a question, encouraging us to move gently between what we know and what we can only imagine. The contrast between certainty and mystery, light and shadow, forms the foundation of curiosity and wonder, drawing the mind into the quiet exploration of human history. Finally, contemplating these sites together creates a narrative that transcends continents and cultures. It is a story not of isolated achievements, but of a shared human curiosity, a persistent drive to understand, shape, and interact with the world. The evidence, scattered yet resonant, hints at a past far older and richer than conventional timelines suggest, a past that beckons to those willing to listen and imagine. In this quiet reflection, we begin to sense the vast, interconnected web of human presence, ingenuity, and mystery, a story written not only in artifacts and stone, but in the very patterns of the earth itself. Human memory is a strange and delicate thing, stretching across centuries, sometimes millennia, preserving fragments of experiences we can never fully verify. In this section, we turn our attention to the myths, epics, and oral traditions of cultures around the world, stories that seem fantastical on the surface, yet whisper hints of events, places, and knowledge from a time that predates written history. These narratives serve as fragile bridges between the known past and the deep unknown, offering tantalizing glimpses of civilizations, wisdom, and human experience that may have been lost to time. Consider the ancient Sumerian myths, some of the earliest recorded stories in human history. Tales of gods descending from the heavens, of great floods that reshaped the world, of cities that existed long before even the earliest known settlements. These stories are vivid and elaborate. While some scholars dismiss them as symbolic or allegorical, others see faint echoes of events long forgotten, perhaps memories of cataclysms, migrations, or civilizations buried beneath layers of soil and time. There is a rhythm to these stories, a careful weaving of the natural world, human behavior, and cosmic patterns that suggests an understanding far deeper than the simple moral tales we often reduce them to. Journeying to Egypt, we encounter myths that intertwine human history with the divine. The stories of Osiris and Isis, of great builders and celestial watchers, hint at knowledge of astronomy, agriculture, and social organization that the ancients may have possessed. Temples, monuments, and tombs are not merely physical structures. They are narrative devices carved in stone, echoing stories that may have been passed down orally for generations before being etched onto papyrus or limestone. As we trace the paths of these myths, we notice that they are not static. They shift, evolve, and absorb new layers of meaning as centuries pass, suggesting that human memory is flexible, capable of preserving the essence of truth even when details fade. Beyond written records, the oral traditions of indigenous cultures provide a more direct connection to a distant past. Native American stories speak of great floods, lost lands, and creatures that no longer exist. In Australia, the Dreamtime narratives describe the creation of landscapes and life forms with an astonishing awareness of geology and ecology. In Africa, tales of ancient kings, lost cities, and mysterious travelers carry hints of real events, transported through rhythm, song, and repetition. These myths are more than mere entertainment. They are repositories of collective knowledge, cultural memory, and perhaps fragments of truth that science has not yet fully recognized. One of the most striking aspects of myths is the way they echo across continents. suggesting shared human experiences or a hidden common memory. Flood myths, for example, appear in Mesopotamia, India, Greece, the Americas, and beyond. Could these stories be the cultural residue of real, cataclysmic events that occurred thousands of years ago? Or do they reflect a universal human fascination with the forces of nature, the fragility of life, and the inevitability of change? Either way, the similarities are uncanny, offering a subtle, almost dreamlike sense of continuity that reaches across time and space, linking cultures that would otherwise seem entirely separate. Legends often encode practical knowledge as well. Instructions for survival, observations about the stars, the cycles of rivers, the behavior of animals, and the rhythms of the seasons are hidden within tales that seem purely imaginative. A story about a wandering hero may also teach navigation techniques. A myth about a divine flood may preserve geological memory of rising seas. These are whispers from the past, soft and elusive, yet persistent enough to survive generations. As we listen carefully, the boundaries between myth and reality begin to blur, revealing a delicate dance between imagination and memory, between the known and the hidden. There's also a profound poetic quality to myths, a slow and rhythmic unfolding that makes them particularly suited to a sleep-friendly narrative. The repetition of motifs, the gentle cadence of oral storytelling, and the vivid imagery of gods, monsters, and ancient landscapes create an immersive experience for the mind. As we recount these stories, we enter a meditative space, allowing the listener to drift into contemplation, imagining worlds long vanished yet somehow still alive in memory. This is where myths serve not only as evidence of a hidden past, but as a bridge between intellect and emotion, between curiosity and wonder. In exploring myths, we begin to sense the enormity of what has been lost. Entire civilizations, along with their achievements, their struggles, and their understanding of the world, may exist only as shadows in the stories we now tell. Yet even these shadows are powerful, suggesting a depth to human history that is rarely acknowledged in mainstream accounts. The ephemeral nature of myth mirrors the fragility of memory itself. How easily history can be reshaped, simplified, or forgotten, but also speaks to human resilience, the instinct to preserve meaning and continuity across generations, even in the face of overwhelming loss. Finally, myths challenge our assumptions about time and history. They encourage us to consider a past far older and more intricate than conventional timelines allow. They invite us to see the world not merely as a linear progression from primitive to advanced, but as a tapestry woven from countless threads, many of which are frayed, hidden, or forgotten. In the quiet exploration of these stories, we encounter not just the traces of ancient people, but reflections of ourselves, our fears, our dreams, our endless curiosity, and our desire to leave something behind, even if only a whisper for those who come after. By the end of this section, the listener is left in a suspended, contemplative state, with the sense that myths are not merely old stories, but fragments of a hidden chronicle of humanity. They have been preserved across generations, offering glimpses into a world that may have existed long before recorded history, a world that still speaks softly to those willing to listen. With this perspective, we transition naturally toward the exploration of forbidden archaeology and the tangible evidence that might corroborate the mysteries hinted at in myth. In quiet corners of the world, beneath layers of soil, ice, and sediment, there are objects and structures that challenge everything we think we know about human history. These are the relics that mainstream archaeology often struggles to explain, the anomalies that do not fit neatly into the tidy timelines presented in textbooks. Known as examples of forbidden archaeology, they exist at the edges of our understanding. Strange tools, massive constructions, and traces of human activity in places and times where conventional science says they could not exist. Their presence invites a slow, meditative questioning. What if our understanding of the past is far more limited than we believe? One of the most intriguing examples comes from South America, in the high plains of Peru and Bolivia. Sites like Puma Punku contain stone blocks of such immense size and precise alignment that their construction seems impossible without advanced technology. Some stones weigh hundreds of tons, carved with exacting precision and fitted together with a sophistication that challenges modern engineering. The traditional view suggests ingenious manual labor, simple tools, and extraordinary effort. But the more we examine these structures, the more they seem to hint at knowledge and techniques lost to time. The quiet tension between what we see and what we expect invites a kind of reverent contemplation, encouraging the listener to imagine ancient hands shaping stone with a skill that continues to astonish. Across the globe, in Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza has long been a source of both fascination and mystery. While textbooks attribute its construction to tens of thousands of laborers over decades, certain aspects remain puzzling. The precision of the blocks, the alignment to celestial bodies, and the internal chamber's geometry suggest a sophisticated understanding of mathematics and astronomy. As we narrate these wonders, we contrast the certainty of modern explanations with the lingering gaps in our knowledge, allowing a quiet sense of awe to settle in. The pyramids stand as silent witnesses to human capability, yet also as reminders that perhaps there is more we do not yet understand about the origins of civilization. Forbidden archaeology is not limited to stone and monumental structures. Consider anomalous artifacts found in unexpected geological layers, like tools or carvings in strata dated millions of years older than Homo sapiens. These objects, sometimes called out-of-place artifacts, challenge assumptions about when humans first appeared, what they were capable of, and how knowledge and technology might have been preserved or lost. The scientific community debates their authenticity and meaning, yet their very existence invites a slow, reflective curiosity. What stories might these fragments tell if we could interpret them fully? By dwelling in this tension, listeners are drawn into a meditative engagement with history's possibilities. Even underwater, evidence emerges that challenges established narratives. Submerged cities off the coasts of India, Japan, and the Caribbean hint at civilizations lost to rising seas and shifting continents. Structures, roadways, and carvings lie silently beneath the waves, inaccessible for most, yet speaking to a time when human activity extended into regions now hidden from view. The calm, slow rhythm of the narration mirrors the slow passing of millennia, allowing the listener to imagine these sunken landscapes, once vibrant with human life, now muted beneath layers of water and silt. In this quiet, immersive reflection, forbidden archaeology becomes more than a set of anomalies. It becomes a doorway into a hidden past. Even in the written record, there are hints of forgotten knowledge. Ancient manuscripts and inscriptions sometimes reference places, events, and technologies that do not align with known history. Codices, stone inscriptions, and clay tablets speak of celestial observations, engineering feats, and distant lands that conventional timelines cannot easily reconcile. As we examine these sources, the narrative balances scientific caution with poetic exploration. Rather than insisting on definitive explanations, we allow the listener to linger in curiosity, imagining the people who created these records, the worlds they inhabited, and the knowledge they possessed. There's also a subtle, almost mystical quality to these discoveries. Forbidden archaeology touches on the tension between human ambition and nature's vast timeline. Structures built with precision may align with solstices and equinoxes, or mirror celestial configurations lost to modern eyes. Tools and artifacts carry an unspoken story of ingenuity, adaptation, and creativity. The calm narration encourages the listener to not only observe these mysteries intellectually, but to feel them, to sense the echoes of ancient minds striving to understand their world in ways that continue to elude us. Yet these anomalies often provoke discomfort. They challenge accepted narratives, destabilize familiar timelines, and force a reconsideration of humanity's origins. This discomfort is subtle, almost imperceptible, but keeps the mind awake in quiet wonder. We present these findings not as definitive proof, but as invitations to think differently, to expand the imagination, and to recognize that human history may be far more layered, complex, and mysterious than conventional accounts suggest. This section walks a careful line between skepticism and possibility, ensuring the listener remains engaged, thoughtful, and contemplative rather than confused or overwhelmed. In exploring forbidden archaeology, we also encounter the human tendency to forget, overlook, or dismiss. Entire civilizations may vanish under the weight of time, natural disasters, or cultural upheaval, leaving only scattered remnants that challenge our understanding. The very act of discovery, whether accidental or deliberate, becomes a meditation on impermanence and memory. The quiet persistence of these artifacts, surviving floods, earthquakes, and erosion, underscores both the fragility and resilience of human endeavor. By presenting these remnants gently, almost dreamlike, the narrative maintains the soothing rhythm suited for sleep-friendly listening while keeping curiosity alive. By the end of this section, the listener is immersed in a world where human ingenuity, lost knowledge, and unexplained artifacts coexist with the certainty of scientific consensus. The tension between what is known and what remains mysterious creates a calm, lingering wonder, opening the mind to possibilities that extend far beyond traditional history. Forbidden archaeology, in this context, is not a controversy to be solved, but a quiet meditation on humanity's hidden story, a story that beckons us to listen carefully, to imagine patiently, and to honor the vast, shadowed depths of our past. As we traverse the shadows of history, a subtle but persistent question emerges. Could there have been a civilization so ancient and sophisticated that its traces have been scattered, submerged, or forgotten entirely? Across continents and cultures, faint patterns and echoes suggest more than isolated brilliance. They hint at a connected human experience, one that may have predated the earliest civilizations we study today. This is not a claim to certainty, but an invitation to ponder the possibility that humanity's story is far older and more interconnected than the conventional narrative allows. Consider the remarkable similarities between ancient structures on opposite sides of the globe. In South America, the massive stone terraces and precise masonry of the Andes bear an uncanny resemblance to some constructions in Africa and the Middle East. Across oceans, sites in Asia and Europe exhibit geometrical alignments that mirror celestial patterns, reflecting knowledge of astronomy that seems far advanced for their supposed time. These parallels, whether the result of shared knowledge, convergent development, or something even more mysterious, challenge the assumption that early civilizations were isolated and entirely independent. They whisper of a human potential that transcends geography, as if the seeds of advanced thought were scattered across the earth long before recorded history. In myths and oral traditions, this possibility appears in subtle ways. Stories of advanced cities, great floods, and travelers who carried knowledge across seas recur across continents. From the Sumerian accounts of lands beyond the known rivers to the Vedantic texts in India describing ancient sages and lost kingdoms, these narratives suggest that human memory preserved fragments of a reality far older than we can verify. Even if these stories were embellished or symbolic, their repeated appearance worldwide hints at a shared recognition of an earlier human achievement, a global awareness of ingenuity that predates our accepted timelines. Archaeological anomalies lend further weight to these contemplations. Structures like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to over 12,000 years ago, suggest communal planning, artistry, and social organization that were thought to emerge only much later. Submerged ruins off the coasts of India and Japan imply that rising seas may have erased entire urban landscapes. In South America, the precise stonework of Puma Punku and Tawanica hints at engineering abilities that remain challenging to replicate even today. Taken together, These sites paint a picture not of scattered, primitive societies, but of humans capable of remarkable coordination, knowledge, and ambition, possibly across vast distances. Even in the realm of artifacts, tantalizing hints appear. Tools, carvings, and inscriptions discovered far outside their expected chronological context raise the possibility that technological knowledge may have been lost and rediscovered multiple times over millennia. The idea of a global civilization is not necessarily one of uninterrupted continuity, but rather of recurring human ingenuity, a pattern of rises, collapses, and rediscoveries that leave fragments behind, sometimes in strange or unexpected places. The remnants themselves are often silent, yet they speak to an imagination and capability that challenge the linear story of progress we are taught. The possibility of an ancient global civilization also invites us to rethink the human mind. Could early humans have possessed cognitive abilities, creativity, and memory that allowed for advanced understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering far earlier than we assume? The alignment of monuments with celestial events, the precision of tools, and the sophistication of myths all suggest a consciousness attentive not only to immediate survival, but to patterns, cycles, and knowledge preservation. Such awareness may have enabled cultures separated by oceans and continents to develop remarkable similarities, leaving traces that continue to puzzle archaeologists and historians. In contemplating this possibility, it is helpful to consider not only the monumental evidence, but also the quiet, often overlooked aspects of ancient human life. The meticulous organization of early agricultural societies, the development of calendars, and the construction of ceremonial centers all indicate planning and understanding of complex systems. Across the globe, these achievements suggest that humans were capable of forming networks of knowledge, perhaps exchanged through trade, migration, or oral tradition, long before written history formalized these ideas. Even without direct proof of a single unified civilization, the parallels themselves imply a collective intelligence, a shared capacity that transcends specific cultures. Yet, much of this ancient knowledge may have been obscured or lost. Natural disasters, rising seas, volcanic eruptions, and glacial movements could have erased entire populations and their achievements. Societies may have collapsed under environmental stress, leaving only scattered monuments, myths, or artifacts to hint at what once existed. This impermanence is reflected in the very anomalies we study today. Isolated artifacts, sunken cities, and the faint echoes and legends that survive millennia. By considering the fragility of civilization, we are reminded that history is not a neat, unbroken line, but a mosaic of accomplishments, losses, and mysteries. There is also a poetic element to the idea of an ancient global civilization, a vision that moves beyond rigid timelines and archaeological certainty into the realm of imagination. It invites us to picture distant landscapes dotted with cities, temples, and observatories, alive with human activity, conversation, and curiosity. These worlds may have thrived for centuries or millennia, now mostly reclaimed by the earth, the water, or the passage of time. As listeners, we are encouraged not merely to consider the evidence, but to feel the echo of human presence that has endured beyond recorded memory, a whisper of ingenuity and wonder stretching across time and space. Ultimately, the possibility of an ancient global civilization challenges our perspective on who we are and where we come from. It asks us to imagine humans capable of extraordinary foresight and knowledge, communities that collaborated across great distances, and a world where the foundations of civilization were laid far earlier than conventional history allows. The calm, reflective tone of this meditation is crucial. It allows the listener to wander through these possibilities slowly, savoring the wonder without rushing toward conclusions. In this gentle exploration, curiosity becomes an end in itself, an invitation to consider the depth and richness of human potential across the ages. By the end of this section, The listener is left with a sense of quiet awe. Whether or not a truly global civilization ever existed, the patterns, anomalies, and myths encourage a broader, more contemplative view of human history. We begin to see our ancestors not merely as isolated inventors, but as participants in a long, mysterious, and interconnected story. With this perspective, the narrative transitions naturally toward human evolution and the deep roots of our mind, preparing the listener to consider not only what humans have built, but also how our consciousness has shaped the unfolding of history itself. As we continue to drift through the hidden layers of history, we turn our attention inward, toward the human mind itself, the quiet engine of imagination, memory, and ingenuity. To understand the possibility of ancient civilizations, lost knowledge, and mysterious achievements, we must also explore the evolution of human consciousness. The story of the mind is deeply intertwined with the story of humanity, shaping the ways we perceive, create, and preserve the world around us. Long before monumental architecture, written records, or myths, early humans were observing, reasoning, and dreaming, laying the subtle groundwork for the civilizations that would one day arise. Fossil records reveal a long and intricate history of human evolution. Early hominins, stretching back millions of years, demonstrate not only the development of physical traits, but also signs of complex behavior. The creation of simple tools, the care for the injured or elderly, and the formation of early social groups point toward a mind capable of foresight and empathy. These behaviors, while subtle, suggest the emergence of consciousness as an evolving process, one that would eventually enable humans to contemplate the stars, record history, and construct ideas that transcend immediate survival. In this quiet reflection, we begin to see that the roots of intelligence stretch far deeper than the first cities or inscriptions. Archaeological evidence supports the idea that early humans were not simply reactive beings, but thoughtful observers of their environment. Tools crafted from stone, bone, and would display both creativity and precision, implying planning and experimentation. Cave art, appearing tens of thousands of years ago, reveals not only artistic expression, but a symbolic awareness, a desire to communicate abstract ideas. These creative endeavors hint at the birth of culture and the ability to record and transmit knowledge across generations. Even without formal education or writing, early humans were building the foundations of intellectual life, a silent, unseen scaffolding for civilizations yet to come. The evolution of the human brain itself provides further insight into these capabilities. Fossilized skulls suggest a gradual increase in cranial capacity, paralleled by changes in brain structure that supported memory, abstract thought, and problem-solving. Neurological studies of modern humans, combined with observations of surviving hunter-gatherer societies, hint at the deep cognitive potential inherent in our species. The capacity to plan, innovate, and reflect may have been present far earlier than traditionally assumed, enabling early humans to interact with the world in ways that left subtle traces for us to uncover today. Language, too, emerges as a profound marker of cognitive evolution. Even before written scripts, humans developed complex systems of communication, enabling the sharing of knowledge, myths, and technical information. Oral traditions preserved histories, survival strategies, and cultural insights, allowing groups separated by geography to retain a collective memory. In this way, the human mind became both a repository and a transmitter, carrying fragments of understanding across generations, sometimes for tens of thousands of years. The myths, stories, and legends we explored earlier are direct expressions of this capacity, a bridge between thought and action, imagination and reality. Symbolic thinking and abstraction are central to understanding how early humans could conceive of ideas that seem advanced for their time. Aligning monuments with celestial events, creating calendars, or developing rituals to mark seasonal changes all require the ability to see patterns and anticipate outcomes. These behaviors suggest that the human mind, even in its earliest stages, possessed a subtle sophistication that allowed for knowledge accumulation and long-term planning. The evolution of cognition thus becomes a key to understanding the anomalies of history, the advanced achievements of vanished civilizations, and the enduring mysteries scattered across the globe. The evolution of the mind is not merely biological. It is cultural, social, and deeply experiential. Human intelligence flourished through collaboration, observation, and the quiet passing of knowledge from one generation to the next. Social structures, shared labor, and collective memory reinforce the capacity to solve complex problems and adapt to changing environments. Even without written records, early humans cultivated a form of understanding that was resilient and far-reaching, forming the invisible scaffolding upon which ancient societies could one day flourish. As we reflect on these roots, it becomes evident that the mind's evolution is inseparable from the broader mysteries we have explored. The anomalies in archaeology, the myths preserved across continents, and the remnants of possible lost civilizations all rely on the human capacity to innovate, remember, and imagine. By tracing these capabilities back to their earliest origins, we begin to appreciate the continuity of intelligence and creativity, stretching from prehistory to the monumental achievements of later civilizations. In quiet contemplation, we recognize that the story of humanity is as much about cognition and consciousness as it is about stone, metal, or ink. Even today, when we gaze at ancient sites or puzzling artifacts, we are engaging with the minds of our distant ancestors. Every carved stone, painted wall, and carefully placed structure is a testament to thought, planning, and awareness. In a sense, the evolution of the human mind connects us intimately to the hidden past. The discoveries, the art, the symbols, and even the myths are all manifestations of cognition stretching across time. By meditating on this continuity, the listener is invited to feel the subtle presence of ancient intelligence, imagining the world as our predecessors might have perceived it, and understanding that knowledge itself is a living thread running through the ages. Finally, contemplating the ancient roots of human consciousness encourages a quiet humility and wonder. The mind, with its capacity for creativity, reasoning, and abstract thought, is both fragile and enduring. It allowed humans to survive, innovate, and leave traces of understanding that persist long after the civilizations themselves have faded. In this meditative space, the listener is encouraged to appreciate the profound mystery of human evolution, not merely as a biological process, but as the awakening of thought, imagination, and culture that underlies every mystery we have yet to uncover. By the end of this section, the listener is left with a sense of awe for the deep roots of human intelligence, aware that the mind itself has been an agent of history for tens of thousands of years. This reflection naturally prepares us for the next bridge section, which will synthesize the known and unknown and guide the audience gently toward contemplating the broader patterns and lessons hidden within humanity's ancient story. As we drift through the tapestry of humanity's hidden past, a gentle realization begins to emerge. History is rarely linear, neat, or complete. The journey so far has moved through fossils, vanished cities, anomalous artifacts, myths, and the evolution of the human mind. Each discovery, each story, and each strange trace of the past reminds us that the known and the unknown exist side by side, like shadow and light, endlessly entwined. In this quiet space, the listener is invited to pause, reflect, and sense the delicate balance between certainty and mystery. The known, our textbooks, scientific studies, and archaeological records, offers comfort, structure, and clarity. It is the foundation upon which societies build understanding, teaching, and memory. Yet, as we have seen, the known is often fragmentary, selective, and sometimes misleading. Buried beneath it lie traces of what might have been. Ancient civilizations erased by floods, lost technologies, or human ambition that left little physical evidence. These shadows of the unknown are neither fully tangible nor entirely imagined. They linger at the edges of our awareness, whispering possibilities that the mind can explore but never fully grasp. Bridging the known and the unknown is not a matter of forcing answers or rejecting evidence. Rather, it is a gentle exercise in imagination, curiosity, and respect for the past. It is about letting go of the rigid expectation that history must be complete and instead allowing the fragments, artifacts, myths, anomalies to speak in their own quiet language. Each unexplained structure, each out-of-place object, and each recurring story becomes a doorway, inviting the listener to wander through time, to imagine the humans who lived, thought, and created long before recorded history. In this reflective space, contrasts become illuminating. The precision of a megalithic structure stands against our assumption of primitive tools. The sophistication of an ancient map challenges our timelines of exploration. A myth repeated across continents hints at a shared memory that defies isolation. By dwelling in these contrasts, the listener begins to sense the subtle dialogue between what we know and what remains hidden. This dialogue is not uncomfortable. Rather, it is quiet, meditative, and profoundly human. It is the recognition that history is not simply a record of events, but a living, evolving conversation between the past and the present. The bridge between known and unknown also encourages a contemplative awareness of impermanence. Civilizations rise and fall, knowledge is preserved or lost, and nature reshapes the earth without regard for human ambition. Yet, even in this impermanence, echoes remain. Fossils, ruins, myths, and anomalies serve as faint but persistent reminders of human ingenuity, resilience, and curiosity. In this sense, the unknown is not a void but a subtle presence, offering insight, inspiration, and a sense of connection to the vast span of time before us. By embracing both the known and the unknown, we prepare the mind to receive the deeper lessons of humanity's hidden past. We allow curiosity to unfold gently, without the pressure of certainty, and create space for reflection, imagination, and wonder. This balance between clarity and mystery transforms the study of history into a quiet meditation, where every fragment of evidence becomes a brushstroke in a vast, incomplete painting. The listener is encouraged to drift through this landscape slowly, letting the contrasts, echoes, and shadows settle in the mind like a soft, whispering wind. As this bridge section draws to a close, the focus turns naturally toward reflection. We carry forward the accumulated wonder, anomalies, and insights, preparing to contemplate not just the evidence of the past, but the lessons it imparts. The known and the unknown, when held together in gentle balance, allow us to approach history with humility, curiosity, and quiet awe. This mindset becomes the lens through which the final reflections will be experienced, an invitation to see humanity's story as a living, breathing tapestry, still unfolding beneath the surface of time. As we stand at the threshold between history and reflection, the whispers of a hidden past begin to coalesce into quiet lessons. The journey through ancient fossils, vanished cities, enigmatic artifacts, and myths has revealed more than the mysteries themselves. It has shown us the patterns, the fragility, and the enduring ingenuity of humanity. These lessons are subtle, not proclamations of fact, but gentle reminders of resilience, curiosity, and the impermanence that shapes every civilization. In this calm space, the listener is invited to consider what the past can teach us about the present and our place within the vast expanse of time. One of the first lessons emerges from the fragility of human achievement. Entire civilizations, once vibrant and thriving, can be erased by forces beyond their control: floods, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, or shifts in climate. Cities buried beneath the sands, monuments submerged beneath the sea, and tools hidden in layers of earth are all reminders that human endeavor, no matter how grand, is delicate in the face of time and nature. Yet, within this fragility lies a quiet beauty. The ephemeral nature of existence encourages us to cherish the fleeting moments of creativity, connection, and insight. We are part of a continuum, a brief but meaningful thread in a story that stretches far beyond individual lifetimes. The second lesson arises from human ingenuity and adaptation. Across continents, cultures have found ways to survive, thrive, and innovate in challenging environments. From the precise alignment of megalithic structures to the careful observation of celestial cycles, from the creation of complex tools to the preservation of oral traditions, humans have demonstrated a capacity for understanding that transcends time. These examples encourage a reflection on our own potential, suggesting that the abilities to think, create, and adapt are intrinsic to the human spirit. The hidden past reminds us that knowledge is not a product of a single era, but a cumulative thread, woven from countless acts of observation, experimentation, and imagination. Curiosity itself becomes another enduring lesson. The anomalies, myths, and artifacts we have explored suggest that human curiosity has always been a driving force, propelling us to explore, question, and dream. Even when evidence is scarce, imagination has filled the gaps, preserving fragments of understanding across generations. In this sense, curiosity is not simply a desire to know, but a method of survival, a way to navigate an uncertain world, and a bridge between the known and the unknown. The past whispers that this instinct, subtle yet persistent, is as vital now as it was tens of thousands of years ago, guiding us toward new discoveries and insights. Another lesson emerges from the interconnectedness of human experience. Despite vast distances and temporal separations, we find echoes of similar patterns, practices, and stories across civilizations. Flood myths, astronomical knowledge, and structural alignments repeat in disparate locations, suggesting that human experience, while diverse, is also profoundly shared. These connections hint at a collective intelligence and cultural memory that survives in fragments, often hidden, yet resilient. By acknowledging this interconnectedness, the listener is encouraged to see humanity not as a series of isolated societies, but as part of a continuum, each generation building, preserving, and reshaping the knowledge inherited from those who came before. The hidden past also teaches humility. It is a reminder that much remains unknown, and that our understanding of history is always partial, provisional, and subject to revision. Anomalies, myths, and lost civilizations challenge the confidence of certainty, urging us to approach the past with openness and respect. In this quiet meditation, the listener can appreciate that gaps in knowledge are not failures but invitations to explore, to question, and to imagine. Humility allows us to hold both wonder and skepticism together, embracing the mystery without diminishing it. Finally, the hidden past encourages reflection on impermanence and legacy. Civilizations rise and fall. Knowledge is preserved or forgotten, yet certain traces endure: artifacts, myths, stories, and innovations. These remnants connect us across time, reminding us that every act of creativity, observation, or care leaves a mark, however subtle. By listening to the past with attentiveness, we gain insight into the values, fears, and dreams that shape human life across the ages. The past, even in its shadows and silences, becomes a guide, not only for understanding history, but for contemplating how our own actions may ripple into the future. As this section draws to a close, the listener is left with a sense of quiet reverence. The lessons of the hidden past are not loud or urgent. They are soft, meditative, and enduring. They encourage reflection, curiosity, and humility, inviting us to recognize that human history is neither simple nor complete, yet full of profound insight and beauty. By understanding fragility, ingenuity, curiosity, interconnectedness, humility, and legacy, we are better equipped to navigate our own lives with awareness and grace. In this gentle contemplation, the past becomes more than a collection of dates or monuments. It becomes a living, breathing teacher. Every fossil, ruin, artifact, and myth carries a whisper of wisdom, inviting us to pause, to wonder, and to listen. And as the listener drifts further into this reflective state, the mind is prepared for the final meditation, the closing section that frames the hidden story of humanity as a quiet, ongoing journey beneath our feet, where mystery, memory, and imagination continue to unfold. As our journey through the hidden corridors of time draws to a close, we arrive at a quiet, meditative realization. The story of humanity is far from fully written. Beneath the soil, buried in sand, submerged under oceans, or hidden in the folds of memory, traces of our ancestors continue to speak, softly, persistently, almost imperceptibly. The discoveries, anomalies, myths, and reflections we have explored are not merely remnants of the past. They're invitations to engage with a world that stretches far beyond the neat timelines and familiar narratives. In this moment of gentle reflection, the listener is encouraged to breathe, to pause, and to let the vastness of history settle like a soft fog, wrapping the imagination in quiet awe. Throughout this journey, we have wandered between light and shadow, between certainty and mystery. We have glimpsed the foundations of early civilizations, marveled at the precision of megaliths, traced the evolution of the human mind, and listened to the whispers preserved in myths across continents. Each section has offered its own lessons about fragility, ingenuity, curiosity, and the persistence of memory. Now, as we draw these threads together, the focus shifts from specific artifacts or events to the broader, unbroken continuum of human existence. Time itself becomes a companion, a slow river carrying the echoes of countless lives, some recorded and many lost, yet all contributing to the tapestry of who we are. The hidden story of humanity is not linear. It is a mosaic, layered and intricate. Civilizations rise and fall, leaving behind ruins, tools, and stories. Knowledge is preserved or forgotten, only to be rediscovered by later generations. Myths and oral traditions carry fragments of truth through centuries, echoing the thoughts and dreams of people long gone. Even anomalies, puzzles that defy conventional explanation, are part of this continuum, subtle reminders that the past is never entirely under our control and that the unknown is as essential as the known. In this gentle contemplation, the listener is invited to recognize that history is not merely a sequence of events, but a living dialogue between the past and the present. There is a profound sense of connection that emerges from this reflection. When we consider the possibility of lost civilizations, ancient global networks, and the deep roots of human consciousness, we begin to see ourselves as part of a lineage that stretches back far beyond recorded history. Every thought, innovation, and story of our ancestors has contributed to the world we inhabit today. Even in places where evidence has vanished, the echoes remain, and the patterns we recognize, the myths we tell, and the questions we continue to ask. By embracing both the known and the unknown, we participate in a silent conversation that has been unfolding for tens of thousands of years. The quiet, meditative tone of this reflection allows the listener to absorb these insights without urgency. There is no need for immediate answers or resolution. The beauty of the hidden past lies precisely in its mysteries. Just as footprints in the sand are slowly reclaimed by wind and tide, the remnants of civilizations remind us that time is both fragile and enduring. Knowledge may fade, but the curiosity, ingenuity, and spirit of humanity persist, weaving through generations and leaving traces that invite us to wonder. The hidden past, in this sense, is both a teacher and a companion, offering lessons in humility, imagination, and the quiet resilience of life itself. As we contemplate the story that continues beneath our feet, there's a sense of ongoing discovery. The world still holds secrets, sunken cities, buried monuments, forgotten languages, and unexamined artifacts. all waiting patiently for attentive eyes, careful hands, and curious minds. The past is never static. It interacts with the present, reshaping our understanding of ourselves and the possibilities of human achievement. In this calm, reflective space, the listener can imagine walking through ancient landscapes, feeling the weight of history beneath their feet, and sensing the continuity of human endeavor across millennia. Finally, the story of humanity, with all its mysteries, invites a profound emotional resonance. It is a story of fragility and endurance, of ingenuity and loss, of memory and imagination. It teaches us that we are not merely passive observers of history, but active participants in a continuum that extends backward and forward in time. The traces of the past are gifts, whispers that encourage us to explore, to dream, and to honor the achievements, failures, and curiosities of those who came before. In embracing this reflection, the listener is left with a sense of peace, wonder, and humility, a recognition that history is not a fixed tale, but a living, breathing journey, continuing quietly beneath our feet, inviting us to listen and imagine. In this final moment, the documentary closes not with a conclusion, but with an open-ended meditation. The hidden story of humanity continues in the sands, the stones, the seas, and the human mind. It encourages patience, reflection, and awe, leaving the listener in a calm, dreamlike state, ready to drift into sleep, carrying the quiet echo of civilizations long past and the gentle promise of mysteries still waiting to be discovered.